Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of information, from cutting edge research to really powerful personal stories, and we distill the most important insights, basically giving you a shortcut to being truly well informed. Today, we're plunging into a topic that, well, it touches every single one of us: the incredible human capacity for resilience and even sometimes profound growth when facing immense adversity. We're looking at sources that they really range from academic studies on the neurobiology of stress all the way to gripping accounts of survival and transformation. Stories that span centuries, different cultures. It's fascinating stuff.
That's right. Our mission today really is to unpack what resilience truly means, how it shows up, not just in individuals, right, but in groups too. And perhaps most importantly, how it's often not just about bouncing back to where you were before, it's about finding a way to move forward. And often that involves some radical personal change that can leave you, well, stronger than before. We'll explore the underlying science, the psychology behind it, and the raw human experience that makes this such a fascinating and, frankly, essential subject for anyone navigating life's inevitable challenges.
So, if you've ever found yourself wondering how some people don't just endure the unthinkable, but seem to almost thrive afterwards, or maybe how entire communities manage to come together and rebuild in the darkest of times, then get ready. We've got some surprising facts, and I think some real aha moments coming up. Okay, let's unpack this and dive deep into what it truly means to be resilient.
Defining resilience more than just bouncing back.
Right, let's start with the basics then. When we talk about resilience, what exactly are we referring to? It feels like a word we hear constantly, everywhere, but its full meaning might be more nuanced, maybe more dynamic than many of us realize. What is it, really, at its core?
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, maybe the most crucial thing to grasp, is that while resilience is broadly defined as like the ability to maintain or regain functioning when you face adversity,
Yeah.
it's so important to understand that it's not some static quality. It's not something you either possess or completely lack.
It's something you just have or you don't. Fix.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of people think of it that way, like, oh, you're either born resilient or you're not, like a personality trait
Yeah.
almost. But the research, well, what our sources really highlight again and again, is that it's incredibly dynamic.
Dynamic, okay. How so?
Yeah, think of it less like a rock, unchanging, and more like a river, maybe, always adapting its path around whatever obstacles are there. The studies consistently show it's this evolving process. So your capacity for resilience, it isn't set in stone. Not at all. It's constantly shifting depending on, well, the specific circumstances you face, the kind of adversity, the context you're in, even where you are in life.
Ah, so it changes throughout your life. It's not fixed from birth.
Totally. So yeah, it's not just one single thing. It's this fluid capacity, really, that can grow stronger, shift. It's woven into your whole life story. It develops.
That's a powerful reframing, actually. It makes it sound less like you're either lucky or unlucky and more like it's something that can develop, almost like a skill you hone or maybe a muscle you can train. That offers a lot more agency, doesn't it?
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. And the really interesting part, I think, is that this dynamic nature, it applies beyond just the individual. Our sources really delves into this concept of collective resilience. The ability of groups, communities, even whole nations to overcome adversity together. For instance, take sports. Resilient teams aren't just about individual star players having grit, right? They're characterized by strong shared commitment to each other and this remarkable ability to actively respond to challenges as a unit. One study, looking across various sports, actually found that this collective resilience carried more weight in predicting group success, specifically team victories, than leadership style alone did.
Really? More than leadership?
Yeah. It suggests that the internal cohesion, that shared understanding, the collective determination within the group itself, that could be a more powerful predictor of winning than just the coach's approach.
Yeah.
It really underscores that we are profoundly social beings. Our strength often comes from those connections.
That's a really important distinction. It shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from just individual toughness to how groups navigate things together, almost like a single adaptive organism. What does that look like in practice, though, especially in the most extreme circumstances where survival itself is on the line?
Well, consider the powerful and widely documented example of the group of young men who survived that plane crash in the Andes back in 1972. I mean, they were faced with just unimaginable adversity, stranded for 72 days in this incredibly hostile, brutally unforgiving environment, freezing temperatures, hardly any resources. Their story, which has been documented in various accounts, reveals this profound, almost instinctual understanding that for sheer survival, they absolutely depended on each other. One survivor explicitly stated that the group just knew this interdependence. They knew they had to find light in the darkness by uniting. Yeah. They consciously transformed the individual I into a collective we. And that created this synergy, making them much stronger than just the sum of their individual parts. Their ability to share the burdens, the responsibilities, recognizing their shared fate. That was absolutely critical in their ability to endure. And ultimately, to survive something that seemed unsurvivable.
That sounds like such a radical shift. Moving from that primal individual survival instinct to a truly collective mindset, especially when facing such desperate odds. How did this collective resilience actually manifest, practically speaking? How do they manage to function, to organize under that kind of immense pressure where every single decision could mean life or death?
Well, they instinctively organized themselves. They distributed tasks based on, individual skills,
Yeah.
willpower, physical condition. And this wasn't some pre-planned strategy session, right? It was this emergent, adaptive response to immediate dire needs.
Just figuring it out on the fly.
Exactly. So others who weren't strong enough for, say, strenuous activities, maybe due to injury or exhaustion, they focused on vital tasks that were less physically demanding, like melting snow for water, which is a constant essential need. Meanwhile, others were tasked with tidying the plane cabin, their only shelter, really, against the brutal elements, or making improvised sleeping bags and walking shoes from plane cushions, just using whatever scraps they had. This immediate task-oriented subgrouping, where everyone had a defined role, a clear purpose, all driven by that shared immediate goal of survival. It significantly reduced the chaos in what was, let's face it, an alien and deadly environment. This practical, cooperative approach was just fundamental to their ability to function, to maintain morale, and to persist day after agonizing day.
That makes so much sense. Having a clear purpose for action, even tiny actions, to combat that feeling of just overwhelming helplessness. It gives you something concrete. What about the idea of hope in situations like that? You often hear about hope being essential for survival, but how did that play out for them? How does it connect to this active form of resilience you're describing?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the survivors, Nando Parado, reflected really deeply on this. And his insight is, I think, profoundly illustrative of active resilience. He observed that simply waiting for hope to save them, passively hoping for rescue, could actually inhibit the will to act. It could paralyze them.
Interesting. So hope alone wasn't enough.
Yeah. Right. He suggested that hope, by itself, doesn't really provide comfort or aid. It needs to be combined with action, with willpower. He famously said something like, "I have hope, but help it a little."
Mhm.
And this highlights that critical dynamic aspect of resilience we talked about. It's not passive waiting for some external salvation or a miracle. It's active, relentless engagement with a challenge. It's about leveraging that glimmer of hope, sure, but using it as fuel for purposeful action. Recognizing that agency, even when the odds feel overwhelming, is what truly propels survival, progress, and ultimately a different outcome.
It's the difference between just wishing for change and actively working towards it, even in tiny steps.
Precisely.
The science behind our inner strength.
That's just an incredible illustration of resilience in action. Seeing how a group collectively adapted, found agency through that purposeful action. But that brings up an even deeper question, doesn't it? What's actually happening inside us, inside our bodies and minds, at the biological and psychological level? That allows for this remarkable capacity to adapt, to not just survive, but potentially thrive.
Right. This raises the really important question. What are the fundamental mechanisms? What supports resilient functioning at that deeper internal level? And the research reveals this incredibly complex interplay. It's genetic, it's neurobiological, it's psychological factors all working together in concert. So on the biological side, studies point to specific genetic variants that seem to be associated with resilience. These influence everything from how we regulate stress hormones to the availability of neurotransmitters in the brain.
So actual genes.
Yeah, specific genes. For instance, some genes, like OPRM1, that one plays a role in how our brains process pain and pleasure, or
Right.
NPY, which is a neuropeptide that helps regulate stress and anxiety. These have been consistently linked to resilient outcomes, and not just in one or two studies, but across different studies, even across different species.
Yeah, across species.
Yes, which suggests these are pretty fundamental pathways. And what's compelling isn't just that these genes exist, but that variations in them can literally fine-tune our biological response to adversity. Think of it like different tunings on a complex instrument, which is your stress system. Some tunings might make certain individuals naturally more adept at returning to a balanced state after stress. Other genes, too, like CAC and N1C, DCC, FKBP5, These names keep popping up in both human and animal research. It supports the idea that we share these fundamental biological pathways for coping. And interestingly, for some genes like OXTR, that's the oxytocin receptor, or CRHR1, COMT, BDNF, APOE, SLC-KEC6, A4, the same specific form of the gene, what scientists call an allele, has been associated with resilience across different ways of defining resilience.
Okay, so that suggests these specific gene versions might be a good starting point for understanding common resilience pathways, regardless of the specific trauma.
It certainly points in that direction. It suggests these genes might indeed provide a foundation for understanding these common underlying resilience pathways that kind of transcend specific traumatic events.
So some people might literally have a genetic predisposition towards resilience, making them naturally better, maybe, at handling stress. That sounds a bit like winning a biological lottery, but how exactly do these genes translate into a more robust response?
Well, yeah, that's definitely part of the picture. These genes influence how our stress response system works. Specifically, what scientists call the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis.
The HPA axis, right, I've heard of that.
Yeah, you can think of it as your body's central command center for stress. It's a complex feedback loop managing how you react to stress and, crucially, how you recover from it. It's like a chain of command that starts in your brain, signals your pituitary gland, which then tells your adrenal glands to release stress hormones like cortisol. So, general resilience mechanisms might be the ones that support the optimal calibration of this system, and especially the flexible deactivation of the stress response.
Turning it off is just as important as turning it on.
Exactly. That prevents the kind of chronic, sustained stress that can be so damaging to the brain and body over time. For example, certain genetic variations in genes like FKBP5 can lead to what's called a blunted cortisol response to environmental challenges. Now, that doesn't mean ignoring stress. It actually indicates enhanced biological resilience because the body doesn't overreact or stay stuck in that high alert state unnecessarily, even in people who've had a history of early adversity.
Okay, so it's not just about reacting effectively, but about how quickly and efficiently your body can switch off that stress response and get back to a balanced state. Homeostasis?
Precisely. Efficient recovery is key.
And I've heard quite a bit recently about the gut-brain connection, how it impacts everything from mood to mental health. Does that play a role in resilience too? Yeah. Connecting the physical and the mental in maybe surprising ways?
Absolutely. It's turning out to be a really crucial piece of the puzzle. Groundbreaking insights, particularly from places like UCLA, are revealing that resilience is truly a whole-body phenomenon. It involves not only the brain, but also the gut microbiome, that vast, complex community of trillions of microorganisms living in our digestive tract.
Trillions, wow.
Yeah, it's staggering. And it's not just about digestion. It's this dynamic two-way communication highway between your gut and your brain. So when you're stressed, your brain sends signals down to your gut, right? And this can disrupt the delicate balance of your gut bacteria. And this is the fascinating part, it's a two-way street. These bacteria also send signals back up to your brain, and those signals can potentially influence your mood, maybe increase feelings of anxiety or stress, creating this continuous feedback loop.
A gut-brain stress loop.
Exactly. And what's really compelling is that individuals with higher resilience tend to have healthier, more diverse, and more balanced gut microbiomes. This is consistently correlated with lower levels of anxiety and depression, higher reported mindfulness, and even better cognitive performance, things like memory and attention.
That's incredible. So gut health is directly linked to how resilient we are.
It strongly suggests that, yes, it reinforces this idea that the mind and body are deeply, intimately interconnected in our ability to handle life's challenges. It makes gut health a surprising but potentially crucial component of overall resilience that we're really only just beginning to fully understand.
Okay, so beyond this fascinating biology, the genes, the HPA axis, the gut microbiome, what about the psychological factors? Are there things we can actively cultivate, habits we can adopt to become more resilient in our daily lives?
Oh, definitely. Psychologically, numerous protective factors have been identified across the lifespan, and many of these are well within our capacity to cultivate. So early in life, things like strong self-regulation skills, the ability to manage your emotions, your thoughts, your behaviors, and having robust, consistent support from family, school, peers, that's crucial for laying a foundation of security and coping. As we move through life, social support remains absolutely paramount, but self-care practices also become increasingly important.
Self-care, right. But not just bubble baths, I assume.
No, not just bubble baths, although those can be nice. We're talking about practical habits that directly impact our physiological response to stress and our psychological reserves. Things like maintaining a consistent sleep schedule, establishing relaxing bedtime routines, practicing effective time management like breaking down big, daunting tasks into smaller, manageable steps, and engaging in regular physical exercise. These practices aren't just about feeling better, though they do help with that. They can literally improve sleep quality, reduce feelings of overwhelm, clear stress hormones like cortisol from your system, enhance overall cognitive performance, basically directly bolstering your capacity to manage daily stressors.
So these practical habits and routines can literally make us more resilient, biologically and psychologically. It's not just about willpower, it's about building supportive systems into our lives.
Exactly. They directly influence our physiological response to stress. And then additionally, there are formal therapies and training like cognitive therapy and mindfulness, which have shown really profoundly positive and measurable effects on individual resilience. Cognitive therapy, for instance, helps you identify and challenge those unhelpful thought patterns that can really exacerbate stress. And mindfulness training, which is all about cultivating present moment awareness. Well, that's been linked to a significant drop in stress hormones like ACTH, adrenocorticotropin hormone.
ACTH.
Yeah, that's the signal from your brain telling your adrenal glands to pump out cortisol. So, mindfulness isn't just a calming practice. It seems to literally help rewire your body's stress factory, helping to optimize and flexibly deactivate that HPA axis we talked about earlier.
So it helps you regulate that stress response at a biological level.
It strongly suggests that. These practices lead to a heightened ability to cope with stressors by modulating the body's stress response right at the source, making you more robust when life throws pressures your way.
Beyond resilience, the concept of post-traumatic growth.
Okay, we've talked about maintaining function, regaining function after adversity, even adapting and strengthening our internal systems through things like good habits and mindfulness. But what about the idea of actually growing from a traumatic experience? That sounds almost counterintuitive. You'd think trauma would only diminish you or scar you, not somehow elevate you.
Right. And this is where the really profound concept of post-traumatic growth, or PTG, comes into play. Unlike resilience, which, as you said, often implies maintaining stability or maybe returning to a previous baseline level of functioning after a challenge, PTG describes an experience where an individual's development in certain areas actually surpasses what was present before the crisis occurred.
Surpasses, so you end up better off in some ways.
Potentially, yes. It's not just recovery. It's a profound qualitative change, a genuine transformation of self. While traditional psychology, for a long time, focused almost exclusively on the devastating effects of trauma, and rightly so, trauma is devastating. The emerging field of positive psychology now highlights this remarkable human capacity, not just to resist, but to rebuild. And crucially, to find benefit and new meaning from even the most shattering events. It's about recognizing these opportunities for positive change, even right in the midst of immense struggle.
So it's not just getting back to normal, as people say. It's potentially reaching a new, maybe higher level of functioning or understanding, perhaps even becoming a fundamentally new, maybe more evolved version of yourself. That's an extraordinary idea.
Exactly, that's the core concept. And our sources suggest that many individuals who experience significant difficulties do report improvements across several key areas of their lives. These commonly include things like better, deeper, maybe more authentic relationships, a stronger and more profound sense of personal strength or inner wisdom, also sometimes a more developed or evolved spirituality, and often a heightened, almost visceral appreciation for life in general, valuing the simple things more acutely.
That makes sense. After facing something huge, the small things might seem more precious.
Precisely. However, it's important to add a note of caution here. Researchers are still diligently exploring the precise nature and extent of these positive changes. Some studies indicate that actual, measurable personality changes following trauma might be less common than the reported growth.
Ah, so what people say changed versus what actually changed.
Potentially. Part of the challenge is how growth is often measured frequently. It's retrospective, through self-reports, looking back. And it can be really challenging for anyone to accurately assess how much they've truly changed from a past self, especially when looking back at a profoundly traumatic period. There can sometimes be what some researchers call an illusion of growth, where individuals might retrospectively downplay how they were before the trauma to kind of highlight the transformative impact of the event, maybe due to an emotional need to see progress after suffering so much.
Okay, that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily negate the growth, but it highlights how complex it is to measure subjective change accurately, especially years later.
Exactly. It adds a layer of complexity.
Yeah.
But this raises an important question about the fundamental mechanisms behind PTG, whether it's fully real or partly perceived. It seems to be deeply associated with the psychological process of meaning-making.
Meaning making, we touched on that with the narratives earlier.
Right, so when an experience happens that is perceived as wildly inconsistent with your core beliefs, your values, your goals, what researchers call your global meaning, it creates significant distress, a profound sense of disorientation. Think of your global meaning as your internal map of how the world works, your fundamental assumptions about fairness, safety, purpose.
Your basic understanding of reality.
Basically, yes.
Mhm.
And when a trauma shatters that map, meaning-making is the cognitive and emotional effort to reconcile this devastating discrepancy. You either try to reinterpret the traumatic situation in a new light, find a new purpose within it, or you fundamentally change your global meaning, your map, to accommodate this new, harsh reality. Success in this process, finding some kind of coherence again, reduces the distress and restores a sense of harmony between what you believed about the world and what you actually experienced.
So it's essentially about trying to find meaning or maybe create new meaning in what happened to you, to put the pieces of that shattered map back together, perhaps in a completely new configuration.
Yes, it's fundamentally a cognitive process, an active struggle to reestablish coherence in your understanding of yourself and the world. The confrontation with a major crisis often demands both emotional relief and cognitive clarity. It pushes people to construct new understandings, maybe revise their goals, build new meanings for their lives. However, and this is a really critical nuance, it's a delicate balance. And it's not always straightforward or universally beneficial. Sometimes, for example, the explicit linking of negative personal attributes to challenging behaviors, like, say, excessive drinking, that has actually been associated in some studies with poorer mental health outcomes.
Really? That seems counterintuitive. You'd think acknowledging fault would be part of growth.
Right, but it suggests that the content of the meaning you make and how it's ultimately integrated into your sense of self and the world is crucial. It's not just the act of making meaning itself. Simply creating a narrative isn't enough. The nature of that narrative profoundly impacts the outcome. You can make meaning that is self-defeating or disempowering just as easily as you can create one that is growth-oriented and liberating.
That's really interesting. It adds a crucial layer of complexity. The kind of meaning you create matters just as much as the act of creating it. The story has to be constructive, not destructive.
The power of narrative, crafting our story of growth.
Okay, so it sounds like making sense of an experience, finding or creating new meaning is absolutely key to growth after trauma. And that brings us directly back to the profound power of stories or narratives. How do these narratives, the stories we tell ourselves and maybe tell others, help us process trauma and ultimately build resilience and foster that growth?
Yeah, here's where it gets really interesting, I think, and perhaps one of the most profound insights from our sources. Narratives are truly fundamental to resilience. In fact, you could argue you cannot truly speak of resilience without a narrative of coping, of transformation. Stories provide this powerful inherent framework for reconfiguring one's life, for understanding how past adversities connect, somehow, to future possibilities. They allow us to organize what can feel like chaotic, disorienting experience into something more coherent, something we can understand, learn from, and move forward with.
So it's not just about recounting what happened, like simply listing events chronologically. It's more about actively shaping the story of what happened to you and what it means for your future. It's a creative act then, in a way.
Exactly. It's an active, creative, and dynamic process. Narratives help us generate and manage predictions about the future, which is absolutely crucial for adaptation in a constantly changing world. By segmenting events into beginnings and ends, even if those ends are provisional, just temporary sense-making, we build this valuable pool of past experiences. And that informs our expectations, helps us imagine future possibilities. The meaning-making function of narrative is especially useful here. It allows us to draw new links between different facets of our experiences to update our understanding of the world, a process some call model updating, essentially constantly refining our internal map of how the world works based on new experiences and insights.
Updating the map as we go.
Precisely. It allows us to assimilate unexpected or surprising information into our existing mental frameworks, or even to rebuild those frameworks entirely if the old ones no longer serve us after a major life event. It's this dynamic, active process of sense-making, turning raw, sometimes painful experience into integrated knowledge and wisdom.
And how does this active construction of our life story, this constant refinement of our personal narrative, connect directly to our overall well-being and our ability to navigate future challenges?
Well, it has direct and profoundly measurable benefits for our well-being. Narrative therapy, for example, is a specific therapeutic approach that focuses precisely on helping individuals reframe their life stories. And this therapeutic process, research shows, not only helps significantly reduce symptoms of depression, anxiety, and general psychological distress, but it also consistently enhances self-esteem, builds confidence in one's own abilities, fosters greater empathy both towards oneself and others, and significantly improves interpersonal relationships.
Wow, quite a range of benefits.
Yeah. It empowers individuals by guiding them to develop expertise in their own lives, to challenge unhelpful narratives they might have internalized over time. Stories that can be sabotaging their well-being, holding them back, or framing them as perpetual victims. The act of creating a story that highlights strengths, personal growth, a path forward, rather than just dwelling on past failures or a
Yeah.
fixed identity of victimhood. That is an incredibly powerful tool for cultivating and strengthening resilience. It's about recognizing your own agency, your power, as the author of the next chapter.
That's a truly profound idea, that the act of storytelling itself is a fundamental tool for resilience. Not just a way of sharing an experience after the fact, but an active force in shaping your recovery and growth.
Yes. And this power extends far beyond the individual. It works for entire communities, too. After collective traumas, think natural disasters, widespread social upheaval, profound historical injustices. The construction and sharing of stories aids significantly in social recovery. These shared narratives strengthen cohesion within the community, foster a collective sense of purpose, and help the community heal together. How? By collaboratively making sense of what happened and forging a shared vision for the future. So resilience is far from just an individual trait or a biological mechanism. It is deeply, deeply rooted in cultural, social, and historical narratives.
So the stories we tell matter on every level.
Absolutely. The stories we tell about ourselves as individuals and the stories our communities tell about shared experiences, they literally become the fabric of our ability to recover, adapt, and even grow. They provide the blueprint for collective healing and moving forward.
It's almost like the story you tell yourself and the stories your community tells can literally shape your reality, your ability to recover and grow. It's an active, ongoing, and deeply creative process of self-creation and community creation.
Real-world transformations. Inspiring examples.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The theory, the science behind resilience and growth, the biology, the psychology, the power of narrative. Now, let's try to bring it all to life with some compelling real-world examples from the sources you've shared. Examples that demonstrate these transformative capacities in action.
Okay, let's look at Frida Kahlo. Her life was just marked by immense physical and emotional pain, right from early childhood traumas. She suffered from polio at age 6, which left her with a withered leg. Then at 18, she endured this horrific bus accident that left her with lifelong debilitating injuries. She was often confined to bed in excruciating pain.
Just constant physical suffering.
Constant. And her art became her primary, most powerful mechanism for processing this suffering and for actively making meaning out of it. Through her paintings, she diffused her traumatic reality. She narrated her emotional and physical experiences with this raw, unflinching honesty. She created new, often surreal images that allowed her to inhabit the world from a different, incredibly powerful perspective. Her works, they're filled with rich symbolism. You see bodily secretions, open wounds, dismembered body parts, these visceral representations of her pain.
They are very raw.
Extremely. They weren't just expressions of pain. They were a way to actively transform her pain into something meaningful, something external, and, in its own way, profoundly beautiful. Her creative process was her philosophy of life. It was this defiant act that, as one source puts it, moved her from misfortune to grace and dignity. It was her way of controlling a reality that constantly sought to control her.
She truly embraced art as a philosophy, turning suffering into something profound and empowering. What about her perspective on death? Given her constant pain, her proximity to it throughout her life, it must have been a very intimate relationship.
Absolutely. A performer portraying Frida noted her defiant, almost humorous attitude towards death, quoting her as saying something like, "I had a date with the cold lady and she stood me up. Now you'll see. I had 2 serious accidents in my life. Since that day, death follows me like a shadow, and I mock death and life, because what else is left but to make a fuss?"
Wow, make a fuss. I love that.
Right. It perfectly encapsulates her embrace of humor, her tenacity, her fighting spirit, even while living with constant debilitating pain and facing mortality repeatedly. Her art, her words, her very existence were a testament to her active, defiant resilience, finding agency, even finding joy in the face of the inevitable. She wasn't just surviving, she was narrating this life of vibrant struggle and creation.
That's such a powerful example. using creativity and narrative to transform suffering into this unique, almost celebratory philosophy of life. Who else comes to mind? Maybe as a towering figure of resilience and growth on a truly global scale.
Well, Nelson Mandela is another profound example of just extraordinary resilience and post-traumatic growth, particularly through his self-leadership and his almost unfathomable capacity for forgiveness. I mean, despite 27 years of imprisonment under the extreme, dehumanizing conditions of apartheid in South Africa, he maintained his self-control, his moral compass, his unwavering commitment to reconciliation and forgiveness.
27 years is just
But yeah,
hard to comprehend.
it really is. He meticulously regulated his internal world, his thoughts, his emotional responses, even when his external circumstances were utterly out of his control. His ability to connect his deeply held core beliefs, justice, equality with his daily actions, even in severe isolation, allowed him to cultivate this profound sense of purpose and dignity. He actually used his time in prison for rigorous intellectual development. He studied law, history, effectively turning his confinement into a kind of university, preparing himself for the leadership role he would eventually embrace. His steadfastness, his lack of bitterness in the face of immense suffering became this beacon for his nation and really for the whole world.
And his leadership then extended to the national level, most famously with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That must have been an immense challenge for a country so deeply scarred by apartheid, trying to reconcile such deep wounds.
Oh yes, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, was a truly monumental effort, trying to bridge those deep divisions of the past in South Africa. Its primary aims were, first, to uncover the truth about the gross human rights violations committed during apartheid. Second, to facilitate amnesty for perpetrators who made a full disclosure of their crimes. And third, to recommend reparations for victims. The process itself aimed explicitly to promote national unity and reconciliation. It provided this public platform where both victims and perpetrators could tell their stories, acknowledging the incredibly multi-layered experiences of the South African story.
Giving everyone a voice, essentially.
Trying to, yes. And apartheid, we have to remember, was a system designed to dehumanize millions, depriving them of basic rights, stripping away self-confidence and dignity through this vast, intricate body of discriminatory laws meant to fracture society. So the TRC faced immense challenges. There were criticisms about how it balanced truth with justice, especially concerning granting amnesty to people who committed horrific acts.
That must have been incredibly difficult for victims to accept.
Extremely difficult. However, its democratic and transparent process, combined with extensive public debates, aimed explicitly to nurture reconciliation. It really highlighted that true reconciliation requires more than just forgiveness. It demands respectful remembrance, a full accounting of the past, and a rebuilding of relationships. Though it's important to acknowledge, as our sources do, that there are still conflicting viewpoints on whether it fully achieved its ambitious aims for everyone affected. But it was, undeniably, a profound act of collective meaning-making and narrative construction on a national scale.
They are towering figures, Mandela, Kahlo, almost larger than life in their capacity for resilience and growth. What about more everyday examples? Our sources also touch on the resilience of entrepreneurs, which is something many of us can probably relate to in our own careers or aspirations. Failure is almost part of the job description there.
Indeed. Resilience is perhaps nowhere more evident or more necessary than in the entrepreneurial journey, where setbacks, failures, rejections, they're almost guaranteed, right? Many incredibly successful entrepreneurs face significant failures, rejections, setbacks before achieving greatness. It demonstrates resilience as an absolutely key entrepreneurial trait. Think of an individual named Louisa, mentioned in one source, a business management graduate who unexpectedly lost her job during an economic downturn. Instead of giving up or just wallowing, she reflected on what she did well, what her skills were, and she immediately pivoted. She started selling homemade food items from her kitchen, leveraging her culinary skills and her business background. Through sheer persistence, adapting to market needs, she eventually turned it into a thriving business.
From job loss to business owner.
Exactly. And now she mentors others. She actually credits an innovation program she participated in for profoundly changing her life mission, teaching her, in her words, to keep going no matter the situation. She explicitly states, "iLab taught me that I had to keep going and that I can handle any situation." It showcases that active, determined mindset we discussed earlier, taking action.
So it's about learning from setbacks, really understanding what your core strengths are, and then applying that learning to forge a new path, often one you never even envisioned before the setback.
Exactly. Another well-known example, Jack Ma of Alibaba. He faced rejection from over 30 jobs, failed university entrance exams multiple times. Yet he taught himself English by speaking with tourists. a testament to his proactive curiosity. And he used that same curiosity about the internet, then in its infancy, to build a global empire. Or Richard Branson, founder of Virgin Group, known for his adventurous spirit, his innovation. He built this vast business empire across incredibly diverse sectors by consistently embracing challenges, learning from both successes and failures. And Sarah Blakely, who launched Spanx, a multi-million-dollar shapewear company, despite having zero prior experience in fashion or business, driven by sheer persistence, creativity, and a willingness to learn on the fly after countless rejections from manufacturers.
So many no's before the yes.
Exactly. These stories really underscore that resilience in entrepreneurship is about converting those large, daunting goals into small, manageable steps, rigorously identifying what you do well, continuously seeking new opportunities, and crucially, learning from past challenges instead of being defined by them. It's about that active, persistent engagement with adversity, not just hoping it goes away. You're living narratives of transformation, built one step at a time.
Cultivating your own resilience and growth.
These stories are just incredibly inspiring. From the Andes survivors and Frida Kahlo to Nelson Mandela and these successful entrepreneurs, it truly shows that resilience and growth aren't just reserved for exceptional individuals. They seem to be inherent capacities within all of us, waiting to be recognized, cultivated, developed. So for our listener, thinking about their own lives, what are some practical, actionable takeaways from this whole deep dive, things they can apply to cultivate their own resilience and maybe foster growth when they face challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a core overarching theme across all our sources is the active nature of resilience. It's not passive, right? It requires deliberate effort, conscious choices, even small ones. So, firstly, a really powerful takeaway is to discern what you can control.
Okay, focus on control.
Yeah. In any challenging situation, it's incredibly easy to feel overwhelmed by everything that's going wrong, by the sheer vastness of the problem. But focusing your effort, your energy, your attention solely on what's actually in your hands, rather than being paralyzed by what isn't, that's a foundational step. This conscious choice prevents you from taking on unnecessary obligations, feeling responsible for things beyond your influence. And it helps you funnel your precious energy effectively towards solutions, no matter how small they might seem at first. It's really about identifying your sphere of influence and acting decisively within it.
That's powerful. Identifying your agency in a tough situation, rather than feeling like a helpless victim of circumstance, it kind of reclaims a sense of personal power, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Secondly, build strong, positive relationships. You are not meant to go through life's adversities alone. None of us are. Surround yourself with people who provide confidence and security, people who genuinely uplift and support you, who believe in your capacity to overcome. Social support is such a consistently identified protective factor throughout life, from early childhood right through adulthood. And remember, resilience is also that collective process we talked about, like the Andes survivors transforming I into we. Connection and community can be a profound, even vital source of strength when you face adversity.
So don't try to tough it out alone.
Exactly. Don't try to go it alone, and don't be afraid to lean on your network. These relationships are your external resources, just as crucial as your internal ones.
So who you surround yourself with matters immensely. Creating that supportive ecosystem for your well-being that can literally buoy you during tough times. Makes sense.
Absolutely. And thirdly, learn from past situations and integrate those lessons. This involves a bit of maybe courageous introspection. Identify what typically triggers stress for you, and also recognize patterns of positive behavior and coping strategies that have actually helped you effectively before. What worked for you in a previous difficult period?
Mining your own history for clues.
Exactly. This self-awareness allows you to modify your responses in future similar situations. You're basically building a personal toolkit for navigating challenges based on your own lived experience. And remember, the very act of creating a coherent narrative about your experiences, especially the challenging ones, helps in processing and integrating them. It turns that raw, sometimes fragmented experience into wisdom. It provides the story you can draw strength from for the next chapter. It's about understanding and maybe even shaping your own story of resilience.
Right. Building that constructive narrative we discussed. Okay, so discern control, build relationships, learn from the past, and narrate it constructively. And finally, after this really deep dive into the nature of resilience and growth, what's one big thought, maybe a question, we can leave our listener with? Something for them to mull over that might resonate long after this conversation ends.
Well, this raises an important question, doesn't it? If narratives are truly these powerful tools for actively shaping our future, for changing our understanding of the world, if they can literally transform adversity into growth, Then the question for you, the listener, is what story are you telling yourself about your own experiences, particularly the difficult ones? And how might that narrative, the one you're living inside right now, empower your next steps? Maybe consider how you are currently narrating your life's challenges, and how even a slight shift in that story, a different emphasis, a focus on strength rather than deficit, might unlock new strengths and possibilities you didn't even realize were there.
That's a truly profound way to think about it. It's not just about surviving, is it? It's about the meaning you make, the wisdom you gain, and ultimately the story you choose to live and tell moving forward. What an incredible deep dive into resilience and post-traumatic growth. Really fascinating.
It truly highlights the remarkable, often untapped capacity within each of us, not only to face adversity with grit, but to find new paths, discover new strengths, and often profoundly transform our understanding of ourselves and the world in the process. It's really a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this exploration has provided you with some valuable insights, maybe some practical takeaways, and perhaps even a fresh, empowering perspective on the challenges you face in your own life. Until next time, keep digging, keep learning, and keep building your story.